أهلا بكم إلى هذه الحلقة من مستقبل الطاقة، وهذه عناويننا. الطاقة الاندماجية فيوجن انرجي، فكرة معاكسة للطاقة النووية تشق طريقها إلى الاستثمارات بدعم من كبرى شركات التكنولوجيا. وأول مشروع تجاري للطاقة الاندماجية من شركة CFS يجمع تمويلات ب3 مليارات دولار حتى الآن. نسأل الرئيس التنفيذي عن الجدوى المالية والجدول الزمني للتنفيذ. شمس صغيرة داخل مفاعل، هذه تكنولوجيا ثورية لتوليد الطاقة بلا حدود. نتحدث عما يسمى الطاقة الاندماجية النووية أو فيوجن باور، التي ظلت لعقود فكرة علمية طموحة وباتت الآن مشروعا استثماريا يستقطب استثمارات بمليارات الدولارات. الاندماج النووي هو ببساطة العملية نفسها التي تزود الشمس والنجوم بطاقة. طبعا هذه الطاقة لا حدود لها، لا تنضب، حيث تحدث انفجارات دائمة ينتج عنها اندماج نوى الذرات الخفيفة. هي ذرات خفيفة تشكل نواة أثقل مثل الهيليوم. في هذه العملية يتم تحرير قدر هائل من الطاقة يفوق بكثير ما تنتجه التفاعلات الكيميائية أو حتى الانشطار النووي. هذا عكس الطاقة النووية التي نعرفها، والتي تقوم على توليد الطاقة من انشطار نواة الذرة في مواد ثقيلة مثل اليورانيوم أو البلوتونيوم، مع ما يحمله هذه العملية هو عملية الانشطار من نفايات مشعة طويلة الأمد. لكن عملية نقل بيئة الشمس إلى مختبر على الأرض ليست عملية سهلة بطبيعة الحال، لأنه لكي تندمج النوى الخفيفة يجب تسخين الذرات إلى درجة حرارة هائلة، إلى درجة حرارة الشمس. نتحدث عن 100 مليون درجة مئوية، أي حرارة تفوق قلب الشمس. وتأتي بعد ذلك معضلة أخرى، لأنه ما هو الوعاء الذي يمكن أن يحتوي هذه البلازما الشديدة السخونة من دون أن يذوب؟ منذ خمسينات القرن الماضي يحاول العلماء تحقيق اندماج نووي داخل مفاعل تحت السيطرة، لكن التحديات كانت هائلة لدرجة اليأس من إمكانية الوصول إلى نتيجة عملية على هذا الصعيد. ولذلك شاعت مقولة عن الاندماج النووي بأنه سيبقى طاقة المستقبل ولن يصبح طاقة الحاضر أو طاقة فعلية. لكن العقد الأخير شهد اختراقات علمية مهمة على هذا الصعيد، سمحت بإطلاق مشاريع عدة لتحويل الاندماج النووي إلى مشروع فعلي لتوليد الطاقة. أكبر هذه المشاريع الآن مشروع لشركة Commonwealth Fusion Systems، أو تعرف اختصارا باسم CFS. هي شركة أمريكية تأسست عام 2018، وهي أكبر شركة تعمل على مشروع من هذا النوع في العالم. ما يميزها ليس فقط حجم طموحها العلمي، ولكن طبيعة هذا المشروع والاستثمارات فيه. قبله كان في هناك مشروع في فرنسا اسمه آيتر، هو مفاعل بدأ بناؤه في 2010 والمستهدف إنجازه بعد عام 2030. قبل أيام أعلنت شركة CFS الأمريكية نجاحها في جمع تمويل جديد من السيريز بي بقيمة 863 مليون دولار، ليرتفع إجمالي ما جمعته حتى الآن من كل جولات التمويل إلى نحو 3 مليارات دولار. مشروع الشركة ينقسم إلى مرحلتين أساسيتين. الأولى هي الأهم والأخطر، هي بناء مفاعل اسمه سبارك، هو مفاعل تجريبي يجري بناؤه في ماساتشوستس، ومن المتوقع أن يبرهن عن تحقيق صافي ربح طاقي وبالتالي إثبات فاعلية هذه العملية. المرحلة الثانية التي تأتي بعد ذلك هي بناء منشأة اسمها آرك في فيرجينيا، هي أول منشأة في العالم لتوليد الكهرباء من الطاقة الاندماجية على أساس تجاري، بدعم من شركات تكنولوجيا عديدة أهمها جوجل، التي التزمت بشراء نصف إنتاج الكهرباء من هذه المحطة. إضافة إلى ذلك هناك توسع للشركة من حيث قاعدة المستثمرين لتشمل إلى جانب جوجل بيل جيتس ومؤسسات من اليابان، من أوروبا، وحتى من الشرق الأوسط، وهو ما يعكس انتقال الاندماج من فكرة علمية إلى صناعة عالمية ناشئة. رغم هذا التفاؤل ما زالت تحديات كثيرة، لأنه تكلفة بناء مفاعلات الاندماج ما زالت مرتفعة للغاية. هناك العديد من التقنيات في هذا المشروع لم تختبر بعد على نطاق صناعي واسع، كما أن الوصول إلى شبكات الكهرباء التجارية، الدخول إلى الجريد، يتطلب موافقات تنظيمية وتشريعية قد تستغرق سنوات. وبالتالي يبقى سؤال كبير: هل يمكن للقطاع الخاص وحده أن يمول هذه الثورة، أم أنه لابد من مشاركة الحكومات التي ستظل مطالبة بتقديم دعم مباشر على شكل سبسيديز أو إعانات وسياسات تحفيزية وربما ضمانات سوقية؟ الإجابة ستحدد سرعة انتقال الاندماج من مختبرات الأبحاث إلى محطات الكهرباء. حول مشروع CFS لإنشاء أول محطة للطاقة الاندماجية استضفت الرئيس التنفيذي والمؤسس المشارك للشركة بوب مونغارد، وطلبت منه في البداية أن يشرح لنا ما هي الطاقة الاندماجية وكيف نجحت في جذب كبرى الشركات للاستثمار فيها.
Fusion power is the power of the stars. So we're used to powering things by burning things, fossil fuels, or waiting for the sun to shine or wind to blow. But with fusion power, what it is taking the lightest elements and combining them together and releasing a huge amount of energy. And that would be a process that is the process that powers every single star in the night sky. And on Earth, if we were able to harness that, we'd have an energy source that basically was effectively unlimited. Energy source that everyone had access to the fuels for, an energy source that would be about building advanced technology and less about what are the exact natural resources. And that's a big deal for lots of different people.
That gives us a good foundation. Fusion has been discussed for decades, but now we're reaching a breakthrough. So what made this breakthrough finally possible, and what's making it possible to commercialize this kind of power?
So fusion, we've known how it works since over 100 years, actually. But it's taken decades for research laboratories and universities to take the process in the stars and make it actually occur here on Earth. And that's because it takes extreme conditions. It takes things that are hot, like hundreds of millions of degrees. It takes machines that can hold that hot fuel and insulate it very well. And so over the past several decades, we've gotten better and better and better at that. Places like MIT, where we spun out of, we have record-setting machines that are really close to the conditions that you would need inside a fusion power plant. And in fact, in the United States, about 2 years ago, we reached those conditions of more power out than in, only for a brief instant, but in a machine in California. And so it's this scientific story that's gone step by step by step. And now where we're at is we're at that last step where we start to actually build machines that are power plants that take that reaction, harness it, and turn that reaction into energy we can use. And that's been a story of scientific progress, but also technical progress. We've had recent breakthroughs like AI, and in our case, very strong magnets that we've applied to the historical science, and that's accelerated it forward at a much faster pace.
And who are the stakeholders who are working with you on this ambitious project?
So at CFS, we're the largest of the private fusion companies, and we're really one of the largest fusion organizations in the world. And we work with national labs and government programs in the US and the UK and Japan, but we also work with private companies and a supply chain that spans 30 countries. And we also work in an industry that's starting from basically nothing. There's now over 50 fusion companies and industry associations, et cetera. And this is all towards building the first generation of fusion power plants, where we sell that to utilities. In the US, we're already starting that. And eventually that power is sold to tech companies, like in our case, Google.
So you've described the turning point. Now let's talk about where you are today. Could you walk us through this journey? Where do you stand now? When do you expect to complete your fusion demonstration machine called Spark? And are you on track to achieve your first power plant, you call it ARC, by 2030?
So, it's been a long history of science. And what we're doing right now is we're building a machine that is the sort of first prototype of what a power plant would look like. based on all the science before, but now actually making large amounts of fusion heat. And that's a machine called Spark. And that's being built in Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. And we're about 75% of the way through building that machine. That's a multi-billion-dollar machine, and the world is eagerly anticipating it turning on. And importantly, it's now an engineering project to put it all together and actually fire it up and then actually run the fusion process at an amount of heat that would be in like a power plant. And that'll happen we'll start to turn it on in 26, and in 27, it'll start to make more power out than in. That's a huge moment, because that's basically now you walk up to a facility that is most of the parts you need for a power plant. A few things that we still have to add that are lower science risk. And so that is a big moment. And then that unlocks the first commercial plant, meaning a plant that you build, the utility runs, and it sells electricity to the grid, powering people's houses and industries and data centers. That plant we call ARC, and that's the one we're planning for in Virginia. Haven't started construction of that yet, but that looks like it could be online in the early 2030s.
Very interesting journey, and part of that journey involves strategic partnerships. Google has committed to buy half of the electricity output. And what can you tell us about this offtake agreement in terms of prices, financial modeling, and if we can compare the cost of fusion power to other types of power?
This is a really important power purchase agreement. It's for a lot of power. 200 megawatts is one of the largest in any of the advanced energy generation sectors. It's certainly the largest in fusion. It's direct, so it's between us and Google. It's a true power purchase agreement, like if we were building a coal plant or a solar plant. It's long-term. It's a multi-billion-dollar agreement. And so those are all really important. And what this is Google saying, hey, we want fusion power. It's important to have electricity that is on all the time, that we can build anywhere in the world, that is not dependent on the whims of geopolitics. And we want it to be clean. We want it to be low cost. And that's all part of this agreement. And in terms of how it's competing, in that particular place in Virginia, where there's a huge need for power to power AI and data centers, the power prices are actually higher than they are in, say, Arizona, or where there's lots of sun and not a lot of stuff. And so we're able to support a first-of-a-kind build in that market. And it's competitive against, say, restarting a nuclear fission power plant, splitting the atom, the opposite process that we've done for decades. The idea that fusion could show up and be competitive with that out of the gate is super exciting.
And that leads me to ask about the energy mix. So looking at the bigger picture now, the global energy mix has been debated for decades. Do you expect that the fusion power could ever claim a significant share of the pie in the next decade?
It'll take some time. We have to build a plant, and then you build another plant, and hopefully the second one you go faster and faster and faster. And that's how every energy technology has gotten to where they are today. And we've got to remember, the energy system is so big that when you think about even a small part of it, a single percentage part of it, that's the size of a large oil company. And so it's so big that we can build all sorts of energy technologies. But fusion's unique in that it doesn't have any tie to like a natural resource, or it's not consumption. It's really about technology, that if you know how to build a fusion power plant, you can build them as fast as you can manufacture things, which the world's pretty good at. And so the idea that we could go and scale faster than we've seen before in energy is enticing in fusion. Will that be in the 2030s? It'll start, but it's really key right now to be like, okay, where's the first one? Where's the second one? Who are the geostrategic players? Who's financing this? Who's learning how to build the supply chain? Who's participating in the build out of these plants? So that then we can go fast in like the late 30s, early 40s.
نتوقف مع فاصل قصير نتابع بعده في مستقبل الطاقة. مستثمرون من الشرق الأوسط يشاركون في آخر جولة تمويل لمشروع الطاقة الاندماجية الخاص بCFS. وسعت شركة CFS وهي أكبر شركة اندماج نووي خاصة في العالم وسعت قاعدة مستثمريها، لكن الملفت هو مشاركة مستثمرين من الشرق الأوسط خصوصا من السعودية والإمارات في جولتها التمويلية الأخيرة والبالغة نحو 860 مليون دولار. الرئيس التنفيذي والمؤسس المشارك لشركة CFS بوب مونغارد توقع أن تبدأ عملية إنتاج الطاقة فعليا من أول محطة لها في فيرجينيا في عام 2030 أو بعده بقليل.
It's business. It's business, and when you look at the scale of the energy system and the amount of energy that we are going to need to power the world that we want to live, both bringing people who don't have energy today to the standard of living they deserve, but also powering advanced manufacturing, powering AI, powering the things that today we power with dirty fuels. You know, that big switch in energy is the largest economic transformation in human history. And so who's going to power that? And who's going to benefit from that? And who's going to participate in that is the big question. And our investors, which span from sovereign wealth funds to hedge funds to venture capitalists to billionaires and high net worth individuals like Bill Gates to people like Fidelity, it's a very broad capital mix. They're all looking at this transformation and saying, you know, where are the technologies that are going to underpin this entire new industrialization? And they're seeing, like us, we're the largest company. We have the most capital in basically the entire space in fusion, but also broader in energy.
This round also includes, perhaps for the first time, investors from the Middle East. How did that come about? And are you in discussions with other potential investors in the region?
So we've had long-term relationships with some families in the Middle East. I go there regularly, and we have a presence that is there because the Middle East understands energy. You know, two things are really important here. Understanding how important energy is, what underpins good energy policy, but then also understanding how fast things can change. And nowhere on the globe has changed faster than the Middle East. And so when you combine those two things, it's very apt that the Middle East, from the utilities and companies, to the governments, to the individuals, to the financial institutions, would be interested in something like fusion. It really checks those boxes about the center of literal power that energy gives and the important place in the geostrategic landscape that energy and innovation sit. And so this was a round where we just finished over $800 million raise that had exposure several different entities from the Middle East. And I think that's very exciting because it is bringing technology that originated in places like the US and Japan, but making it much more global and combining it with the expertise about how do you build systems that can scale and how do you think about the energy landscape that exists in places like Abu Dhabi and Riyadh.
Congratulations for that. Bob, do you believe this novel technology can succeed purely on an investment basis without requiring government subsidies at some stage?
You know, most energy technologies usually go through a trajectory that has government involved because, this is capital intensive. It is building things. It's steel in the ground. It's paying workers to build things. And at the beginning of any technology, you usually have some premium that you have to buy down until it becomes sustainable on its own. And fusion's at that stage. So there's still government money going into fusion, and that's broadly around the world in research labs, primarily by historical powerhouses in science and technology innovation, Europe, US, Korea, Japan. Increasingly, though, we also see large government money flowing in places like China, where they're outspending the U.S. on a government basis, 2 or 3 to 1, and that shows you the power that governments can have in shaping the technology landscape by helping innovation happen faster. How far and how long that will go? Well, it should go long enough for us to get the first power plants built, so that we can see the intrinsic commercial viability of the technology. Once that's done, we shouldn't subsidize this forever because ultimately, energy is a market.
When do you expect that to happen? Within years, decades?
In the first generation of plants. So in the early 2030s.
That would be great. Finally, let's look ahead. What's next for CFS? When do you expect the next capital round, let's say?
So we're right now building Spark. That's a execution project, and we'll turn it on. People are very excited to see that. But we're also getting ready for ARC. And part of this capital raise we just finished is to allow us to go and do the early work on that. And so we could always use more capital in what we do. So we're always building relationships with the capital providers in the world that are interested in what's coming. Part of that is because we need capital, but part of it too is because it's education. And we want people to be able to participate in the broader shift that fusion can enable. And so we're always out there talking to capital and the next sort of big structured round. Well, maybe that's after Spark turns on, but by then, of course, everyone will know exactly what fusion looks like because we'll push a button and make a star in a bottle in Massachusetts.
بهذا نأتي إلى ختام هذه الحلقة من مستقبل طاقة. نلتقي الأسبوع المقبل في نفس الموعد. إلى اللقاء.